There's a brand new tank coming to World of Tanks tomorrow, and we're going to have a look at exactly what we're going to be seeing with this brand new tank, and we're going to have a look at some of the other questions that Wargaming have answered, because there's a big amount of stuff that they answered in the most recent stream that we'll be taking a look at in today's World of Tanks console update news. So first things first, what is the brand new tank, as I'm sure most of you want to find out. Now, this is a mercenary tier 8 medium tank called the Mantis, and the Mantis is, as you can probably expect, a American turreted vehicle, such that it has the typical T-57 heavy kind of turret alongside the T-54A1, the T-67, and of course we've been seeing some of the more recent ones in the T-54 heavy and stuff like that. So we can have a look at what this tank is actually all about and what we're having a look at today. So first things first, we can see that the tank has this weird hull armor. Now the hull armor we can actually take a look at tomorrow when the game actually comes out, because it's always a bit of a pain to see, but we can have a look at the kind of key weak points, which by the looks of things is going to be pretty much the entirety of the tank. And we can actually zoom in here just so you guys get a better look. As you can see, you have this area here, which is the lower plate. It is very, very flat, and in fact in the visual model you'd probably see it easier. It's a very flat lower plate, almost like if you've seen the Guard. It's a similar sort of kind of layout, I guess, of the tank, which means it's not going to be very good. You're going to get penned in this lower plate quite easily. However, there is not really an upper plate, which means that if someone's going to be able to hit you, it's going to be horrifically hard for them to be able to pen this upper plate if they're on the same level. Now, as soon as they start to get above you, because this armor is so weak, I mean, this is probably like 10 millimeters or something stupid, they're going to be able to go straight through the upper plate of this thing, which is, yeah, kind of a little bit of a feels bad, unless, of course, this is spaced armor, which we can't actually see because Wargaming haven't allowed us to see that. Now, it doesn't look like it's spaced armor by the fact that we can't really see anything like it's attached to, but I guess we can only find that out tomorrow because it doesn't make it the clearest in this one here. But either way, looks like you're going to be penned very easily. And then turret wise, key weak points are this area here, and then of course on the opposite side, the same cheek area, you do have a cupola, which, I mean, you shouldn't really aim for that if you can see any of the rest of the turret as this kind of cheek on the bottom, so you can see it easier in the visual model. This area here along the bottom, much like the T-57 heavy and all of the kind of T-57 heavy lines, is the weak point. And then as soon as you turn side on, this rear portion of the turret, you can't really see it here, but it's always typically weaker at the back. So like from about here backwards is usually where it's really weak. And even if you do get the side of the turret, you can pen the cheek like we saw, and also the rear portion of the turret here. And often you'll end up ammo racking it or something like that as well, which is always nice. And so essentially that's what the tank's armor looks like. It does have a little bit of spaced armor that you can see here, and it will be effective spaced armor as well. So just be aware of that if you are shooting at the turret. These tracks that are placed on the top, they are actually spaced armor, so you could potentially bounce off of them if you hit this and the armor behind and it's not a nice angle. But armor-wise, looks pretty terrible. I don't think this is going to be pulling off a whole lot of bounces, other than in the mantlet in some places if you manage to hit around the gun, basically. And even then, you could probably pen this thing quite easily. So just be aware of it. The armor model isn't very good, and if you can get any of the hull armor, that's where you want to be aiming. But let's have a look at whether they've made this into a bit of a broken beast, because at the end of the day, when we're playing up against this in the video, or in the videos that we're going to be seeing tomorrow, you'll see whether or not it is actually overpowered. Because, yeah, from my initial overview, it doesn't look too OP, but we never know until we actually play it. And so it'd be interesting to see what you guys think about it. But straight off the bat, this tank has an unbelievable speed, and by speed it has 63 kilometers an hour. Now you might think, 63 kilometers an hour, it's fast, don't get me wrong, and for a medium it's very fast, but 63 kilometers an hour isn't that much. But what you failed to notice, or maybe you didn't, is that there is a power to weight ratio of 33. Now, 33 means that this has a better power to weight ratio than most of the light tanks, which means that this thing is going to be ridiculously fast at being able to get up to top speed, and that is just utterly insane. And not only does it get 63 kilometers an hour forward, but it's got 20 kilometers an hour backwards, which means you can pull back around the corner pretty quickly. And because you have such a good power to weight ratio, you're going to be able to just accelerate backwards and forwards really, really quickly, which makes it quite interesting because we don't typically have mediums with power to weight ratios this high. And you could almost count this as almost like a light tank, to be honest with you, even though it is technically a medium and is as big as a medium and won't get the camo bonuses that a light tank gets. And it certainly won't get the camo bonuses of when you're on the move. But at the end of the day, it's very fast and it can be pretty good at being able to mobilize around the map, or at least that's what these statistics are indicating right here. Now we'll once again see that in the game, but with 9 degrees of gun depression, 9 degrees of elevation, that is awful, literally terrible. This thing is not going to be able to move up, but with 8 degrees of gun depression, it's not the worst, and so you should be able to use a ridgeline relatively well. Maybe not anywhere near some of the Swedish tanks that we have in the game and some of the other vehicles that we have in the game, but it certainly will be up there, and I'm sure that it'll be interesting to make this thing work. But of course, using those gun depression, it's not really going to help you out with this turret. As I said, it doesn't have a very strong turret at all. But it does have 2.1 second aim time, so it is, fairly decent, I guess. But when you then look at how much damage it's dealing, 240 damage, you might think, 240 damage isn't a whole lot. And it doesn't particularly have the best penetration, 210 pen on the standard rounds and 280 on the premium. Now the 280, that is very nice, but 210 pen can be a little bit limiting in some areas, and it's not the worst at tier 8, but it isn't the best either. So you will have to fire some premium rounds, and the unfortunate thing is that those premium rounds are indeed heat, which means they get absorbed by spaced armor, and so some tanks are just a pain to try and pen either way. But it should be pretty interesting to see. But it also has 0.36 accuracy, so that's pretty good, and that will come down significantly as soon as you start putting equipment and consumables and stuff like that on, so that's not too bad either. Now, you might be thinking, yep, so gun is not looking too good, but what you fail to understand, if you're thinking that, is that this tank has 4 shots in the clip. And obviously, because it looks like a 57 heavy, it's most likely going to have a 57 heavy style gun. With the 4-shot autoloader with 240 damage per shell, meaning that you can deal 960 damage, almost 1,000 with this tank if you pen every single shot. But trying to pen every single shot, because the intricate reload is 2 seconds, means you've got to lock someone in place pretty quickly, otherwise they're going to pull behind cover and they're not going to be able to be hit all of those shells. And if you're loading the standard ammunition, you could potentially bounce a few, so that can affect how well the tank performs. But it still has 1800 damage per minute, which is not horrendous. It's bad, but it isn't horrendous for a tier 8. So I mean, it's going to be limiting, but considering that you're an autoloader, you should be able to make it work quite well, because you can come around the corner, you can get loads of shots off, whereas other tanks aren't going to be able to hit multiple shots in the clip. So there's always that. So that's the nice thing about playing autoloaders, and of course why they are so strong, even if they don't have the best damage per minute. So with all of that being said, this tank looks like it's going to be pretty decent, at least an interesting one. And I want to say now, I don't think this tank is going to be super broken. I think it's going to be very fast. It's quite big, which means that it's not going to be, super hard to hit, like you might see with some of the very small tanks with speed. So it's going to get hit quite a lot, even when it's at top speed. It doesn't have the best penetration, which is good. It doesn't have the best alpha damage, which is good when you're adding in an autoloader like this. It has a fairly long intricate reload, which is nice. It's not super long, but for the alpha, it's, not the best. But, that will kind of balance it out, and I feel like it's a fair reload. It's not too long, it's not too short, which is actually quite nice. And for those of you wondering, is this tank going to be balanced? I think for the most part, it looks like it could potentially be quite balanced, and it's actually refreshing to see Wargaming introducing a tank that's novel and unique without just giving it absolutely cracked everything else, which makes me kind of want to try it. And the novel and unique thing is that this is so fast. And so, yeah, I think this is actually going to be quite a nice one to see, and I'll be interested to see what your guys' thoughts are, because, you know, I'm only one person, I only play the game as I like to play it, and of course you guys have a variety of different playstyles, and maybe this tank looks absolute garbage to you, or maybe it looks really, really overpowered. Let me know in the comment section down below. But moving on. It does have 400 meters view range, which is nice as well, and so you should be able to spot, maybe taking advanced optics to boost that up even further, so that you do become almost like a counter to light tanks a little bit, which will be cool. So if you want to purchase this tank, unfortunately you do have to purchase it. It's not a free one, it's not a contract. It would be nice for Wargaming to bring in a few more contracts. I'm talking to you, Wargaming, but unfortunately it isn't. You have to buy it, which is the case with most of the tanks that they make nowadays. It kind of sucks. But tier 8 Mantis medium tank with all of the bonuses that basically get put into this ultimate bonus. As I always say, I would never recommend buying the ultimate bundle unless, of course, money is no object to you, or you just don't really care that you're spending, you know, $50 or $60 to be able to pick it up for 13,500 gold. But for the most people, I would recommend the base version, which saves you about something like 40% of the cost, somewhere in there, which is quite good. And that costs you 8,900 gold for the base version, which essentially is not that much different to the ultimate version. You don't get any bonuses really. You get some XP boosters that, you know, you're probably not going to use anyway. Or some premium time, and these are charged at like full price. And also the advanced optics gun stabilizer and advanced loader, they're all charged at the silver equivalent. I think you get something like 500 silver to 1 gold. So considering that these are like 1.5 million silver to be able to purchase all of these, you're probably looking in the region of about 3k gold, something like that, which will go into this price. So the savings that it's showing you are not necessarily that much of a savings. Considering you can already wipe off 3,000 gold from just these off the top of my own calculations. Obviously, you guys can work it out, but I'm pretty sure off the top of my head that's how much it will be. Either way, it looks like it's going to be fairly expensive if you want the ultimate. But for me, the standard version, it's very cheap for a tier 8. So yeah, I think cheap in quotation marks, because comparatively to some of the other tanks that they released, which are usually about 12,000 gold, this one is cheaper, should we say, but it certainly isn't cheap, as it will cost you around 30 quid or like 25 pounds or something like that, which, you know, it's up to you whether you want to purchase a tank like that. But yeah, I always recommend taking a look at some of the tanks that they release with the seasons, etc., and then deciding after a while which tank you kind of prefer, because they come out quite often, new tanks and stuff like that. So just be aware that maybe next week a new tank will come out that you might like better. So just save up your pennies and use them, preferably not on World of Tanks, but if you are, I don't think this would be a bad one. But obviously stay tuned for tomorrow's review, as it might be entirely different. And considering the tank hasn't yet been released. But I think it will be an interesting novel one, that we haven't really seen a tank like this, to be honest with you, at tier 8 for a medium. But hopefully that was an interesting overview of the Mantis. But we have some other information, and by other information, we have a ton of Q&A stuff that Wargaming goes over. And this is one of my favourite portions of the video, because we get to see what Wargaming's responses are to some of our questions, which are always interesting, to say the least. But first one is there any news on Cold War German light tanks? There is no further news to be shared at this time. It's pretty self-explanatory. Next one, what is the ratio of players on next-gen console and older ones now? We review our platform data a lot, and I would say it's a little more than 50% of our players are still on last-gen hardware. So over 50% are on Xbox One, or the variants of Xbox One, or PS4, whether that be PS4 Pro, PS4 Standard, or whatever versions I play on Xbox. But you guys kind of get the gist if you are a PlayStation player. It's the PS4 is kind of the more used platform than the PS5 and stuff like that, and the Xbox Series X, which is the one I have. but the performance issues with those new consoles is insanely better, and of course you get 120 FPS, so it is much, much better. My experience of playing the game is just so much better when I have moved to the next one, because it just looks better in terms of like the frames that you get. And although you do have to have a monitor or something to be able to use those frames on, because if you only got a 60 hertz monitor, it's not particularly the greatest anyway. But if you've got something like a 144 hertz monitor, they are insanely better. And I always recommend trying it out. But of course, you have to save up many pennies to be able to get it, but maybe that's something worth more than buying a few premium tanks in World of Tanks. So just decide what you want to do. But I really enjoy playing World of Tanks on the new consoles, is what I'm trying to get at. Anyway, can you look into buffing the penetration on the Eastern Alliance Object 120? So I believe this is like the Turan, if I'm right in thinking. No plans for any adjustments on it right now. It's apparently performing well enough, but we'll keep an eye on it. So I think that's a fair assumption. I don't think anyone's really complaining too much, unless that's the medium or light tank that's horrible. But yeah, you guys all know more than me, as I've been really focusing on trying to complete everything in World War II. Next one is the UDES 03. When at low health, the engine smoke blocks the ADS. Is there anything you can do to adjust this? With the engine being right next to the gun on the tank, it's a tricky one, but we'll see what we can do there. I don't know the improvement we could make to that tank, though, just because of the layout. I mean, maybe just stop the smoke on first person, but that might be harder than it seems. Yeah, I could see why it'd be a pain in the backside when it comes to trying to hit things and you're seeing loads of smoke go everywhere. Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where maybe they just remove the smoke off of the tank. I don't know, because does it really add too much to the game, especially if it's frustrating you when you're actually trying to play with the tank rather than just like, yeah, it would look cool with the smoke. Anyway, could you add a French Super Heavies tech tree with a split shared from tier 7 if possible? So could you add a French Super Heavies tech tree with a split shared from tier 7 if possible? We don't have them planned right now, but it's something we can look into. So there's that. I don't quite understand what this is referring to, but yeah. I mean, maybe they're asking that whether they could split the tech tree at a tier 7 to have another tank line. I don't know. Could you change the lock on, because you shouldn't be able to lock on to the center of tank if it's not visible? We wouldn't want to change a behavior like that because of how it's been for a very long time. This would only cause more confusion than it's worth. Yeah, I kind of get that. Would you remove the Waffle E100 and bring it back like the PC did for a special game mode? We have no plans to remove that tank. I don't think the tank is overpowered. Even if we did have a crazy game on stream the other day in the Waffle E100, the tank is just not great, to be honest, in the way that it is, and having been nerfed. But it is still very fun to play. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things. Next one is, could the KV4 get the same buff it got on PC? There's no plans on updating that, but we do keep an eye on PC when they make balance updates to see what the data comes out to be, and that helps keep them more informed. So basically what they're saying is no, they're not going to make the change, but they give us a little bit more in that when they see that a tank is overperforming on PC, they typically nerf it on console, or they don't make the change, which is kind of good, because usually PC get the updates quicker than we do. Therefore, yeah, we might end up with better balance changes, in quotation marks, other than when they go off script and start introducing things like the Ruthless and the Centurion AVRE and bringing in tanks that deal 1,000+ damage every single shot in Cold War when they didn't need to do that, that were completely made up tanks. But, you know, at least when they start making, you know, actual tanks and trying to balance them in the tech trees and stuff, they're usually a lot more balanced than the premium tanks that they introduce that are console exclusive. So yeah, not that I'm making a dig whatsoever. Would you consider a buff to the least played tier 10 tanks, or maybe the tanks with the lowest marks of excellent values to encourage diversity? We always keep an eye on the low performers, and we hope to buff any tanks that aren't performing very good, so expect some updates in the future. I'd kind of like it if, although it would be kind of annoying, I guess, if you grinded out some tier 10s that you want to get, it'd be interesting to see Wargaming like nerf and buff loads of different tanks, so they like become better during certain times and that sort of stuff, where like you could see tanks that are usually pretty bad become really good because they've got a load of like buffs and nerfs, and then some of the more meta tanks being nerfed and like altered slightly, even if, you know, they're only altered for like a couple of months, where, you know, it just shifts up the meta and it makes like other tanks being usable and people go and grind them and that sort of thing. I think that could be kind of cool. But of course, it's very tricky to do that with balancing the entire game, because as soon as you start making huge wide sweeping changes, I guess it could be really annoying, because you might end up with some tanks being absolutely cracked, some tanks being absolutely utter garbage. So I guess, yeah, maybe that will never come in. And maybe it shouldn't come in. But I'd be interested to see your thoughts on like nerfs and buffs to tanks, and what tanks you'd like to see buffed and nerfed. I think it's an interesting topic for sure. Next one is, can we get tracking assist to be changed to something like immobilization assist and have the engine included when it's destroyed? I mean, engine destroyed would be kind of cool. And yes, absolutely, that's something we should consider changing, but actually changing it is going to be a lot of work than I'd imagine right now. But yeah, they'll definitely look into it. I think this could be something cool. It probably should be something like that. It would be nice, but I expect, I'm assuming Teak or one of the devs kind of summed it up where, like, in order to actually go into the files and start changing all of that, it's going to be a lot of work when they could be doing other things that are, I guess, new or novel, or new maps, or like new tech trees or stuff like that, or, you know, new premium tanks that are overpowered and stuff like that. I guess they could do that instead. Yeah, I think they'll do more overpowered premiums. Is it possible to make adjustments in the game menu to adjust the outlines of enemy tanks to be a little bit bolder? Accessibility is really important to us. We have different color mode options, but this one would definitely take some work. They've discussions about this at the time, so we can definitely bring it up with the team. They have discussions about it all the time, sorry. So they can definitely bring it up. I think that would be good. Having just the ability to increase your boldness of the outline, I think that would be good. Of course, people struggle to see, some people don't, and so having the options for either would be really good. And it's usually something that most games have nowadays, is that they want people who maybe don't have the best eyes, as you can see with my glasses, to be able to see easier. Now, I don't have a problem with it myself, but, you know, some people definitely will be. So I think this is something that should definitely be worked on. Just some more changes that we can do ourselves, like visual, even if it's just like game stuff. I think that would be really, really good. But unfortunately, we don't usually get those very often. They usually come in like a big like pack of buffs and kind of additions that they do with like a season. And it's usually like once every 6 months or something like that we might get a few things added. But it's usually on the back burner to the new premiums and new tanks that they do and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how it ends up. Can you reduce the effects of dust particles, buildings, artillery, etc.? So they do have a ticket to investigate the severity of these things, like the theatre of war elements. We have reduced the effects when shells are fired in a previous update, but we'll keep looking at it to improve the visibility in general. One thing I did notice is that when you destroy a building, like genuinely, like the dust is disgusting, and it lasts for like maybe like 5 seconds, maybe longer, and it's like thick smoke that you just can't see through. It's just a pain, and it doesn't look good. It's literally just like a wall of like murky grey. I mean, it doesn't even look good. So I don't really see the point in having it if you're going to do something like that. And that's on Xbox Series X. It probably looks awful on Xbox One. So yeah, I think this is something that doesn't need to be in the game. Or if it is, actually make it look good. Because it defeats the whole point in having it if it looks terrible. So that's my opinion anyway. So yeah, just seems a bit half-baked with like the dust particles for the buildings and stuff like that. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Do you have any plans to stabilize the gun for the Thumper, because the 292 has better DPM and has an option for gun stabilizer? It's currently getting looked at as it was the first big gun added to Cold War, so expect some improvements in the future. I think they were just testing the waters to see whether it would be really OP or like whether it was too bad, and then they can, if it's too bad, they can make changes to make it better. But if it's too overpowered, you get all of the people complaining about how they bought a tank that was severely overpowered and ruining the game. I'm talking about the Panzer V-4 players here. Then they all cry about how they bought a tank that then got changed, which I understand to a degree. You want to buy something, you want to keep it the way it is, and Wargaming definitely want to do that. And I have no grudges towards them, but when it is so obviously like disgusting, and that, you know, Wargaming could just refund everyone the money for the tank, or not the money monetarily, but just give them the gold value of the tank if they made a change, I think that would be good. Because, you know, at the end of the day, they don't have to actually give you your money back for anything, because you are just renting the ability to use the tank, not the actual, you're not buying rights to the tank. So just as a word of warning, if you think that, you know, if Wargaming go ahead and change something, that you're going to get you know, monetary value back, you're not, because Wargaming don't legally have to do it. Maybe they would, but they're definitely not going to do that, let's be honest. But yeah, they don't have to, so just don't fall victim to that if you're thinking that is the case. Not that Wargaming ever actually change premium tanks very often, they usually only buff them. So yeah, that's kind of that. In the future, will we be able to walk around ours and our friends' garages? We do have plans to expand the garage customization. This would be really cool if we had like a clan garage or a clan kind of war room or something to make clans useful, or at least like have some interaction with your clan, because to me they're just a load of names on an external website off of the game. You don't even get a list of clan mates that are in the game that you can invite. So yeah, that would be much appreciated. But they are working on clans, and they said next year will be like a big clan update, apparently, according to some of the articles that they've had on here. So anyway, why is the price of ammo so variable? Some are very low priced and some are very expensive. This is being actively looked at. We have some inconsistencies, so you can expect some change over time in the coming updates, which is fine. Some ammo is just ridiculously expensive, especially when they do like no alpha. So you're not really dealing in much damage, but they're costing like 4,000 silver a shell. Yeah, it can be a little bit crazy, especially with the low alpha damage guns where you have to fire more premium because typically they don't have as much penetration. So not only are you firing like 3 times faster than the other tanks, but it's costing you the same, and you also have no penetration, which means you don't even really have an option to fire standard in some of the like tier 7s that have terrible damage, but also very low penetration on standard rounds. So yeah, that would be good. Are there plans to introduce the British Warrior into Cold War mode? The answer was yes. So we'll be seeing the British Warrior IFV into Cold War, so that should be quite interesting. I'm really looking forward to getting into Cold War properly and trying out some of the tanks, as yeah, I mean, I'm getting close to finishing off World War II now. I think we've only got like 4 tanks left to get in World War II at tier 10, and they're all the terrible ones that I've been kind of throwing to the back of my mind every single time I jump on, which is the like the Japanese heavies. I've got like the couple of Chinese tanks to get, Chinese heavy tanks, I believe, which aren't terrible. They're just like, it's just been something I've never really been focused on getting. And then I believe there's like some off nations. I think I have to finish the French heavies as well, but they're not too bad. But yeah, hopefully we can work towards that by the end of the year. And of course you can join me on the streams on a Friday where we go through and do that. So it'd be interesting to see you guys actually jump in and join the stream on a Friday from 5 p.m. UK, or like, I think it's something like it's like in the morning in the US, so I'm sure some of you might be at work. But yeah, you can always watch the streams back on the live section of the channel. So if you want to see me streaming, playing live, see what my games actually look like in general without being able to pick and choose which of my games I can showcase, like we do on the reviews and stuff like that, then yeah, you can have a look there. But I thought I'd let you know. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about both of the news bits, the Q&A, and of course the Mantis medium tank as well. And one last announcement is that there is the Extra Life kind of charity event that Wargaming run, which will be available this year. So we can have a look at the dedicated article. It is from the 4th to the 5th of November. It is a 25-hour streaming event to raise funds for the Children's Miracle Network hospitals, which I think is a very good cause. And you can do that by actually jumping in and, of course, donating. And I'll leave a link in the description of this video where you can go and donate if you're watching at this point. So yeah, the goal is $10,000 US, which hopefully we'll be able to get there as a community and raise some good money for charity. So yeah, let me know what you thought about all of this news, and of course, go and check out the donation page if you have some spare cash and yeah, you want a good cause to give it to. But other than that, I hope you had a fantastic rest of the day, and I hope you join me back tomorrow for that review of the new tank, and I'll see you there. Goodbye.